Hello there, I just want to make this video showing you what modifications we made to our Northern Tools. Originally it was a 3-point hitch wood splitter. I had it mounted on the back of a 3130 Kubota. Problem with it was slow. It's roughly a 2-foot splitter, and it was taking approximately 22 seconds cycle time out and back. After we modified it from a 3-point hitch to a different version, there's a video on YouTube on drivable wood splitter on the Mega Moto 4's channel, my son's. You actually see it in that version. We mounted it to the front of a Jacobson tractor and ran the pump off the Kohler motor on it. It was alright, it worked okay, but it burned a lot of fuel and the motor was tired and it started to burn a lot of oil too, so we made this version. It's got a Kohler motor on it, new from Northern. I think it's like a 9-horse with their pump, which is the same pump that we had on the Jacobson version. We just bought the new pump mount and the coupling we needed for this motor. Used a 20-pound gas grill tank, propane tank for the reservoir. The only thing I say about that is if you're going to use propane tanks, be careful when you're working with them. Fill them full of water before you do any work to them, as there's a lot of fumes still left in them even years after you've been using them. But the problem Northern Tools has on their older versions of wood splitters, I think all of them were this way, the control valve wasn't mounted like you see here. They actually mounted it off of from this fitting here. This valve was actually the opposite way, end for end. So the control lever was over here. Oops, sorry. Was over there, and they hooked a nipple from the top of that cylinder mount, cylinder feed for the return, to this. So this valve was, like I said, upside down, and this was into there. The problem with that is it keeps cracking the fittings no matter what you put in there. Because I even ran a Schedule 80 fitting, and eventually it cracks. You wouldn't think it would, but it does, and it leaks and all this. So I just made this modification to solve that problem. Like I said, it worked real well because now the control lever is closer to the wedge, so the person on this side running it, it doesn't have to stretch so far when he's holding his piece of wood. So like I said, the valve was turned around and actually the opposite way. So this handle was actually pointed this way. This was down here, but it was over here. So it works. The detent still works going back, and it works fine that way. And that's the mount. Just a piece of 4x4 bent up, welded on there. The hoses, what I did was, this hose here used to go from this fitting, which is on the bottom, remember, to this back of the cylinder. To do this, I needed a little bit longer hose, so I used that hose for here, and this is a new hose. It's 28 inches long, I believe, overall. And that has really worked well. I gotta clean it up and paint it this year. But this version really works well. You can still see where the 3-point hitch arms were here, the pins, and this is where the 3rd point hooked up. I cut all that off. The other modifications we made to this version, I said you tow it on that end if you want to, and then this leg right here flips up and is pinned up in place when you travel. But the wedge, we've added a lot to, which made it a lot better. This is the original wedge height right across here. Now all this has been added. The reason for this piece is if you have like stringy wood that doesn't want to, you have the top piece that doesn't split all the way, and it's taller than a wedge. I set it back so this doesn't really do any splitting. It just kind of like cuts the hairy stuff. But because you don't want this even with here, because you'll put too much force on the wedge and you'll end up ripping the beam and bending it. So this is just to cut all those little stringy pieces. And then my son added these 2 angle irons on both sides, one on each side. You can see there. I think all that is, this happens to be 1/2 by 2.5, I think. And what that does is when this initially pops the wood, and this splits it quicker, it saves a lot of the travel. If it splits fairly easy, that opens it up good. These pieces here are just put on it. We have a 4-way wedge we made. Where is it? It's actually, let me see if I can get it for you. sorry about that, YouTube. Set it on there. We haven't really used it much. Let's see if I put it on the right way. Actually, it goes this way. Yeah, it sets on like that. That just the extra stops to hold it up. If you have good, like 6 or 8 inch wood, and that's what you split, like probably that stuff right there would work good. But we really haven't used it much, because we got all mixture of different kind. This whole setup right here works quite well. Let me back up a little bit. There's our wood pile. There's probably about 9 cord in that pile right now. Give you some idea. It's 6 or 7 pallets each way. Alright, so what we do here, I did this year was we set up 4 piles of pallets. About, they're probably like 36 inches high. And set them next to the splitter, and what we do is I take my tractor, scoop up the chunks. It works better when there's no snow and the ground's frozen. You just dump them on there. My son neatens them up a little bit as I dump them. And that way there, when I'm splitting, my son will stand on this side of the splitter, and I'll stand in between the splitter and that pile, and then I can pull them off, split. And after a few minutes, I have an empty space right there. If I have a bigger piece, I have to split twice, more than once. I just put it back on the table as a table. It seems to be working well. It saves you from having to pick the wood up off the ground. And like I said, it works good for scooping if the ground's frozen, which we're getting to the point where it's not anymore, and there's no snow. But it's still, even if you loaded the bucket by hand and dumped it up there, it still saves you from having to lift it off the ground. And what works good for a bucket, if you have options, is a deep bucket like a Bobcat style bucket, which is what I have on this one here. It's an old Bobcat. It's only 5 feet wide, which works nice, but it's deeper. And it just, that's just what we have left to split. And the only thing you be careful with it, because the bottom of the bucket is longer than a normal bucket, you can actually hurt your hydraulic cylinders if you're not careful. So I use this mostly just for scooping up. I don't dig with this bucket. As the Bobcats are a little ruggeder than these tractors, and they can take it, but it's made, the wood will push in there further nice, and you can scoop up a lot of it without having to get off the tractor. But, it's a little messier right now because of the snow, but there's a pile. Well, I hope these ideas helped. And like I said, I don't think Northern Tool is doing that anymore with that cylinder mount setup, or the hydraulic valve setup. But that's what I had to do, and I can't believe that other people haven't had that same problem with that mount, because I've changed that fitting probably 4 times and finally got sick of it and fixed it right, and haven't had a problem since. I said, hope that helps. Have fun splitting.